Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 60, Euthyphro 12e to 13b. Last time we saw that Euthyphro suggested two parts of justice, clearly thinking of justice in terms of the court of the Archon Basileus, because Socrates had mentioned his own case of asebeia, disrespect towards the gods, and then Euthyphro thought of his own case, which was about murder, and he came up with the notion that justice is therapeia, attending either of the gods or of humans. Socrates had suggested that holiness had something to do with respect, because his own case in the court of the Archon Basileus is about disrespect to the gods. Therefore, Euthyphro went along with this and allowed holiness to be that part of justice, that part concerned with disrespect to the gods, while his own case necessarily then didn't have holiness in it, because it wasn't about respect or disrespect to the gods, it was about murder, it was about relations between humans. This doesn't mean that Euthyphro now thinks that his own case has nothing to do with holiness. It clearly does. He's concerned with miasma, but he's just trying to find an answer which will please Socrates. We may also note that this answer appears to be like Socrates' example about number. There are two parts, the odd and the even, and now of the gods and of humans. And it is theoretically possible, at least, that these two parts of justice could be considered to be two species of justice, implying that justice concerns only humans and gods. If there had been another species, it would have to be of something other than humans and gods. In the ancient world, justice certainly doesn't concern animals. Animals are not taken to court, and we have the example of the court of the Archon Basileus, which is the only example which shows that justice can have something to do with gods as well as humans. So on the face of it, we could consider Euthyphro's answer to be two species of justice, although Euthyphro himself probably wasn't thinking of genus and species. He was simply thinking of the two types of court cases, his own and Socrates, in the court of the Archon Basileus. And we know that it is factually wrong because there is the element of the holy also in Euthyphro's case. Euthyphro was reacting in particular to the point that Socrates' case has to do with disrespect, and his answer involves, therefore, therapeia. Therapeia, in Euthyphro's mind, has something to do with respect. The therapeia of gods is the tending of gods, meaning the religious observance of ceremonies regarding the gods. In temples and in shrines, it's not very difficult to understand what Euthyphro is talking about. However, then Euthyphro says also the therapeia of humans, the tending of humans, in other words, the treatment of humans. And this doesn't have anything to do with religious ceremonies in temples and shrines. And here Socrates has a problem. Euthyphro uses the one word therapeia in two different ways, and this needs to be made explicit. This is how Socrates responds to Euthyphro's answer. Kai kalos gemoi o Euthyphron faine legen, ala smikrutinos etiende esemi. And you appear to be speaking finely, Euthyphro, but I'm still lacking something small. In other words, he's still missing a small point. Ugarpu legesge hoiai per kai hai perita alla therapeia esin toiauten kai peritheus. Legomen garpu hoion famen hippus upas epistatai therapioen allahu hippikos, egar panuge. We're back to Euthyphro's panuge. Indeed, quite, absolutely. And that is his answer to what Socrates has just said. I don't yet understand the therapeia which you are calling, for presumably you don't mean that there is such a therapeia about gods in the way that there are therapeia about other things. For I suppose we say, such as we say that not everyone knows how to tend horses, except the hippikos, the person concerned with horses, the horseman. Isn't that so? Yes, indeed. So we see that Euthyphro is responding only to the very last thing asked, which is who tends horses. Hei garpu hippike hippon therapeia, nai. For no doubt horsecraft is the therapeia of horses. Yes. Actually, hippike, horsecraft, is the techne of horses. Techne is the art, craft, skill from which we get technical. Hippikos is the man pertaining to horses, and hippike is the feminine thing pertaining to horses, and this is techne. The interesting thing here is that therapeia is also feminine, and hippike could be construed as describing therapeia. Socrates doesn't mention techne at all, so it just looks as though hippike does indeed describe therapeia and not techne, although Euthyphro himself should know Greek, and he would know that hippike is hippike techne. We could also ask whether there is any difference between therapeia and techne when it comes to horses. The craft of horses and the tending of horses is surely the same thing, we might say. Actually, the techne of anything is the application of knowledge, experience, understanding on a particular subject, while tending doesn't really require much understanding. Just think about an expert technician telling slaves or servants to go and tend to the horses, and he tells them what to do, but they don't understand why they have to do it. Socrates is clearly talking about techne and not therapeia, because he has referred to the horseman as the one who understands how to tend horses, and this is the technites, the craftsman. Why does Euthyphro go along with this? He knows that Socrates is talking about court cases which are not to do with the gods. In this context, the court case to do with the gods is Socrates' case, the one about asabeia, disrespect. Therefore, Socrates here is talking about therapeia to do with anything other than the gods. And here he's talking about expertise. There is expertise when dealing with humans. And what do we know about Euthyphro? He's an expert. He knows Greek mythology, in other words, mythology. He knows about the gods. So Euthyphro can see himself in what Socrates is arguing for, that in every therapeia there is an expert. And here we have Euthyphro, who is the expert on what the gods think about justice. We may imagine that Euthyphro is quite enjoying this line of questioning. So we've finished with horses, and Socrates carries on with something else Euthyphro can understand. Udege kunas pas epistatai therapeuin alaho kunegetikos. Huto. Not everyone understands how to tend dogs, but rather the dog handler. This is the person who trains dogs to hunt. Quite so, says Euthyphro. Hegarpu kunegetikei kunon therapeia? Nay, for presumably the hunting with dogs is the tending of dogs. Yes. Here we have a problem because kunegetike doesn't really translate that well into English. Kunegetike is pertaining to the driving of dogs, and you drive dogs in a hunt. So kunegetike techne would be the art of hunting more than the tending of dogs. And Socrates is actually using a difficult example which Euthyphro should have thought about. Euthyphro should have said, wait a minute, we're talking about techne, not therapeia. But he didn't, because he likes this line of argument. It's always better to have a positive reason for an interlocutor answering the way he does than simply to say that he's stupid. That doesn't really add anything of substance to the dialogue. Euthyphro is a willing participant in this perversion of Greek, because this is rhetoric, and it makes Euthyphro feel good about himself, because he appears to be an expert. Socrates then gives an even more perverted example. He dege boi latike boon panuge. And ox driving is of oxen. In this case, Socrates doesn't even say therapeia. And Euthyphro could have thought, wait a minute, that's techne. It's the techne of boon. But he says, panuge, absolutely. He de hosiotes te kai eusebia theon, o Euthyphron, huto leges, egoge. And both holiness and respect of the gods, O Euthyphro, do you say thus? I, for my part, following from the last sentence about oxen, we have to supply therapeia. It's not in the text. And without context, we would read this sentence as holiness and respect pertain to the gods. They are of the gods. But in context, the question is, are holiness and respect the therapeia of the gods, the tending of the gods? Euthyphro says, I, for my part, in other words, as far as I'm concerned, this is true, because in the context of this argument, Euthyphro is the expert, and he has to contend with his family who claim that he doesn't know what he's doing.